The stars burned cold and distant outside the viewing window of the Keth flagship. Queen Velira stood with her 4 arms crossed behind her back, watching the small human transport ship approach. Her silver skin caught the light of distant suns, and her tall figure cast a long shadow across the polished floor of the observation deck. "They are here, my queen," said General Bora, stepping beside her. His voice carried the deep rumble of his species, and his scarred face showed years of warfare. "I can see that," Velira replied. Her voice was calm, but inside she felt nothing but disappointment. A human. The Galactic Council had arranged this marriage to strengthen the alliance between Earth and the Keth Empire. War was coming. The Dralith horde was moving through the outer systems, destroying everything in their path. The Council believed that joining the two civilizations through marriage would create a bond strong enough to face the threat. Velira had agreed only because she had no other choice. Her empire needed allies. But humans, they were small, fragile creatures. They lived for less than 100 years. Their bodies broke easily. They needed oxygen, water, and food constantly just to survive. How could such weak beings help her empire? The transport ship docked with a soft sound. Velira straightened her posture and prepared herself to meet her future husband. The doors opened, and a group of human soldiers walked in first. They wore simple gray uniforms and carried weapons at their sides. Then, walking calmly behind them, came a man. Kang Ti-ho was not what Velira expected. He was average in height for a human, with dark hair cut short and simple. His face was calm and showed no emotion. He wore a plain dark suit with no medals or decorations. He looked like nobody important. Velira felt her disappointment grow deeper. This was the man Earth had sent. This ordinary, unremarkable creature. Ti-ho stopped a few steps away from her and bowed his head slightly. "Queen Velira," he said. His voice was soft and respectful. "Thank you for receiving me. I hope this union will bring peace and strength to both our peoples." Velira looked down at him. She was almost 2 heads taller than him. "I hope the same," she said, though her tone was cold. "The ceremony will take place tomorrow. Your quarters have been prepared. My attendants will show you the way." Ti-ho nodded. "Thank you, Your Majesty." He turned and followed the attendants without another word. Velira watched him go, then looked at General Bora. "What do you think?" she asked. Bora made a sound of disgust. "He is nothing. A politician, perhaps, a diplomat, but not a warrior, not someone worthy of standing beside you." Velira nodded slowly. "He will be easy to control, at least. That is something." But as she turned back to the viewing window, something bothered her. She could not explain it. There was something in the way the human moved, something in the way his eyes had looked around the room when he entered. He had seemed calm, yes, but there was something else underneath, something she could not name. She pushed the thought away. It did not matter, he was just a human. The next day, the ceremony took place in the great hall of the flagship. Thousands of Keth nobles and officials filled the room. Holographic screens broadcast the event to billions across the empire. This was a political event, nothing more, a symbol of the alliance between two species. Velira wore her royal armor, silver and white, decorated with the symbols of her house. Ti-ho wore a simple black uniform. He looked small standing next to her on the raised platform. The priest spoke the ancient words of binding. Velira repeated them without feeling. Ti-ho spoke his vows in a quiet voice. His Korean accent was strange to her ears, but his words were clear. And then it was done. They were married. The crowd made sounds of approval. Velira felt nothing. She turned to face the gathered nobles, ready to speak the words of unity that had been prepared for her. But then everything changed. A figure burst from the crowd. It moved fast, faster than any Keth should move. A blade flashed in its hand, and it was heading straight for Velira. The guards reacted, but they were too slow. The assassin was already too close. Velira saw the blade coming toward her chest and knew she could not move in time. And then the blade was gone. Tiho stood between her and the assassin. The human had moved so fast that Valera had not even seen him step forward. One of his hands held the assassin's wrist. The other had already twisted the blade free. In a single smooth motion, Tiho swept the assassin's legs out from under him and brought him crashing to the floor. The entire hall went silent. The assassin struggled, but Tiho held him down with one hand like it was nothing. His face showed no emotion, no anger, no fear, just calm focus. "Guards," Tiho said quietly, "please take this one." Two Keth soldiers rushed forward and grabbed the assassin. Tiho released him and stood up slowly. He picked up the blade from the floor and handed it to one of the stunned guards. Then he turned to Valera and bowed his head. "Shall we continue, Your Majesty?" he asked. His voice was just as soft and polite as before, as if nothing had happened. Valera stared at him. Her hearts were beating fast. She had not seen him move. None of them had seen him move. One moment he was standing beside her, and the next moment the assassin was on the ground. "How did you do that?" she asked before she could stop herself. Tiho looked at her with those calm, dark eyes. "Do what, Your Majesty?" General Bora stepped forward, his hand on his weapon. "You moved faster than our eyes could follow. How is that possible for a human?" Tiho smiled slightly. It was the first expression Valera had seen on his face. "I am just a diplomat, General. I simply reacted, nothing more." He was lying. Valera knew he was lying, but she said nothing. The ceremony continued. The words were spoken. The alliance was sealed, but Valera could not focus on any of it. She kept looking at the human beside her, trying to understand what she had just seen. Later that night, she sat in her private chambers and reviewed the security footage from the hall. She watched the moment over and over again. The assassin moved, and then Tiho was there, his body a blur on the recording. 3 moves. That was all it took. 3 moves that happened in less than 2 seconds. She searched the databases for information about Kang Tiho, ambassador, diplomat, former military, but the military records were classified. She could not access them. "What are you hiding, human?" she whispered to the screen. She did not know the answer, but for the first time since she heard about this marriage, Queen Valera felt something other than disappointment. She felt curious. And deep down, in a place she did not want to admit existed, she felt something else. She felt afraid. 3 weeks passed since the wedding ceremony. Queen Valera tried to return to her normal life. She had meetings with generals, councils with advisors, and reports to read about the Dralath threat. But no matter what she did, her mind kept returning to the human who now lived on her ship. Kang Tiho did not act like a prince or a king's husband. He did not demand attention or special treatment. He woke up every day before the first light cycle and disappeared into the lower training decks. He ate in the common areas with regular crew members. He spent hours in the ship's library, reading files about Keth history and military strategy. Valera watched him through the security systems. She told herself it was for safety reasons. She needed to make sure this human was not a threat, but deep inside she knew the truth. She was fascinated by him. One morning she watched him train. The small human ran on the track for hours without stopping. His body was covered in sweat. His breathing was heavy and rough, but he did not stop. He pushed himself until his legs shook, and then he pushed some more. A Keth medical officer approached her later that day, with a strange expression on his face. "My queen," he said, "I have been monitoring the human's physical condition as you ordered." "And he is damaging himself," the officer said. "Every morning he exercises until his muscles tear. His bones develop small cracks from the stress. His cardiovascular system operates at extreme limits." Valera frowned. "Then why does he continue?" "That is the strange part, my queen. The damage heals. Within a day, sometimes less, his body repairs itself. The muscles grow back stronger. The bones become harder. It is as if his species is designed to break itself and rebuild better than before. Valera said nothing. She had never heard of such a thing. The Keth were strong, yes. They could live for thousands of years, but they did not improve through self-destruction. They simply were what they were from birth. There is more, the officer continued. I researched human biology. They are what their scientists call pursuit predators. In ancient times on their planet, they did not hunt by being faster or stronger than their prey. They hunted by following. They would chase an animal for days without rest until it collapsed from exhaustion. Humans are not built to win quickly. They are built to outlast. Valera thanked the officer and sent him away. She sat alone in her chambers for a long time, thinking about what she had learned. A week later, she made a decision. She would test this human properly. She arranged a sparring match between T-Ho and General Bora. The entire senior staff was invited to watch. Valera wanted everyone to see what happened when a human faced a true Keth warrior. The training hall was large and circular, with observation platforms rising on all sides. Bora stood in the center, wearing light combat armor. He was massive, even by Keth standards. His forearms were thick with muscle, and his eyes burned with eagerness. T-Ho entered wearing only simple training clothes. He carried no weapons. He looked tiny compared to the general. "You honor me with this opportunity, General," T-Ho said with a small bow. Bora laughed. "I will try not to break you too quickly, little human." Valera leaned forward in her seat. Around her, the officers whispered and made bets. None of them expected the fight to last more than a few seconds. The signal was given. Bora moved first. His speed was incredible. His forearms struck at T-Ho like hammers. The first blow caught the human in the chest and sent him flying across the room. He hit the wall hard and fell to the ground. The crowd cheered. But T-Ho stood up. Blood ran from his mouth. At least two of his ribs were clearly broken, but he stood up and raised his hands in a fighting stance. Bora attacked again. More blows landed. T-Ho blocked some, dodged others, but many hit their target. His body twisted from impacts that would kill most beings. He crashed to the floor again and again. And every time, he stood back up. The cheering stopped. The crowd grew quiet. Valera felt her heart's beat faster as she watched. T-Ho's face was covered in blood now. One of his arms hung at a wrong angle. His breathing came in short, painful gasps, but his eyes remained focused. They never showed fear. They never showed pain. They only showed determination. He kept fighting. Bora's attacks became wilder, more desperate. He could not understand why this creature would not stay down. Every blow he landed should have ended the match. But the human refused to accept defeat. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the match was stopped. T-Ho was on his knees, unable to stand anymore. His body was broken in dozens of places. But he had not surrendered. He had not asked for mercy. He had simply fought until his body could no longer obey his will. Medical teams rushed in to take him to the healing center. The crowd was completely silent. Even Bora stood frozen, staring at the blood on the floor. Later that night, Valera went to General Bora's quarters. She found him sitting alone in the dark, drinking quietly. "What troubles you, General?" she asked. Bora looked up at her. For the first time in centuries, she saw something strange in his eyes. Not fear exactly, but something close to it. "He should be dead, my queen," Bora said slowly. "I broke his bones. I ruptured his organs. I hit him with enough force to kill 3 Keth warriors, and he kept standing. His bones broke and he kept standing." He took another drink. "I have fought many enemies in my life," he continued. "I have faced creatures that were stronger than me, faster than me, but I have never faced anything like that." He did not fight to win. He fought because stopping was not something he understood. Valera left the general to his thoughts and went to the medical center. She found T-Ho awake despite his injuries. He lay on a healing bed, his body covered in bandages and regeneration patches. He looked terrible, but when he saw her enter, he tried to sit up. "Please stay down," Valera said quickly. "You are badly injured." Tiho relaxed back onto the bed. "I apologize for the poor performance, Your Majesty. The general is a skilled fighter." "Poor performance," Valera repeated. "You survived a battle that should have killed you. You refused to give up despite injuries that would have broken anyone else. How is that a poor performance?" Tiho smiled slightly. It was a tired smile but genuine. "I lost." "But you did not surrender." "No," he agreed. "I suppose I did not." Valera sat down beside his bed. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then she asked the question that had been burning in her mind. Why did you not give up? Why did you keep fighting when there was no chance of victory?" Tiho was quiet for a moment. He stared at the ceiling, thinking. Then he looked at her with those dark, calm eyes. "I do not know how to give up," he said simply. "It is not something my people do well. When we fight for something that matters, we do not stop, even when it hurts, even when it seems impossible. We just keep going." He closed his eyes. "My father taught me something when I was young," he said softly. "He said that losing is acceptable, giving up is not. As long as you keep standing, you have not truly lost." Valera watched him drift off to sleep. She stayed by his bed for a long time, looking at this broken, stubborn creature. She was beginning to understand something about humans. They were not weak. They were something else entirely, something that the galaxy had never seen before. And for the first time, Queen Valera wondered if perhaps she had underestimated them all along. The Dralith envoy arrived without warning. A single black ship appeared at the edge of Keth space and demanded an audience with Queen Valera. The message was clear: come alone, or the Dralith would consider it an act of war. Valera was not afraid. She had faced many enemies in her long life, but she brought her council with her to the meeting room anyway, along with General Bora and a full security team. And she brought Tiho. The human had recovered quickly from his injuries. Too quickly, the doctors said. His bones had healed in days instead of weeks. His internal organs repaired themselves faster than their machines could track. It was unnatural, they claimed. Valera thought it was simply human. The Dralith envoy was a tall, insect-like creature with razor-sharp limbs and compound eyes that reflected the light like black mirrors. It stood in the center of the meeting room, surrounded by Keth guards who kept their weapons ready. "Queen Valera of the Keth Empire," the envoy said. Its voice was harsh, like metal scraping against stone. "The Dralith Horde brings you a message from our Supreme Commander." "Speak your message," Valera said coldly. The envoy made a sound that might have been laughter. "The Dralith Horde has conquered 12 star systems in the past cycle. We have crushed the Vorn Collective. We have burned the worlds of the Pale Ones. No force in this galaxy can stand against us." It took a step forward. The guards raised their weapons, but Valera held up a hand to stop them. "Our Supreme Commander offers you a choice," the envoy continued. "Surrender your empire now and your people will be allowed to serve us. Resist and we will destroy everything you have built, every world, every ship, every Keth that draws breath." Silence filled the room. The council members exchanged nervous looks. General Bora's hands tightened into fists. The envoy's compound eyes shifted to look at Tiho, who stood quietly at Valera's side. "We have heard about your new alliance with the humans," it said. Its voice dripped with mockery. "A sad joke. Humans are soft creatures. They die from changes in temperature. They cannot survive without air for more than a few minutes. Their bodies are fragile sacks of meat and water. You have allied yourself with insects." Some of the council members shifted uncomfortably. They had thought the same thing after all. Many of them still did. Valera opened her mouth to respond, but Tiho spoke first. "May I address the envoy, Your Majesty?" Valera looked at him in surprise. In all the weeks since their marriage, he had never spoken in public meetings. He had always stayed quiet, observing from the background. But now something was different. There was a coldness in his eyes that she had not seen before, a hardness in his voice that made her pause. "You may speak," she said. Ti-Ho stepped forward. He looked small compared to the towering Dralith envoy. His plain, dark uniform seemed simple next to the creature's armored body. But when he spoke, his voice filled the room. "You call us soft," he said. "Fragile, weak. You are not the first to make that mistake. You will not be the last." The envoy clicked its mandibles in amusement. "The insect speaks." Ti-Ho continued as if he had not heard. "My species crawled out of caves millions of years ago. We survived ice ages that covered our planet. We survived plagues that killed half our population. We survived wars that destroyed entire cities, wars where we turned our most terrible weapons against each other." He took another step forward. His voice remained calm, but there was something beneath it, something dangerous. "We split the atom and used it to burn 2 of our own cities to ash. And then we rebuilt. We poisoned our world with our own waste, and we found ways to clean it. We killed each other by the millions, over and over again throughout our history, and we never stopped advancing." The envoy shifted uncomfortably. The amusement was fading from its posture. "We are not soft," Ti-Ho said. "We simply prefer peace when it is possible. But when it is not possible, we become something else. We become very, very patient." He stopped just a few meters from the envoy. His dark eyes locked onto its compound gaze. "You have 3 cycles to withdraw from the border systems," Ti-Ho said. His voice was quiet now, almost gentle. "If you do not, you will learn what humans do to those who threaten our families." The envoy let out a harsh laugh. "You threaten the Dralith horde, one small human against the greatest military force in the galaxy. You are either mad or stupid." Ti-Ho smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something that others did not. "I am neither," he said. "I am simply telling you what will happen, that is all." He turned and walked back to his place beside Valera. The meeting continued, but the Dralith envoy had lost its confidence. When it left, it did not laugh or mock anymore. It simply delivered its final warning and departed. That night, Valera found Ti-Ho standing alone on the observation deck, staring at the stars. "That was unexpected," she said, stepping beside him. "I apologize if I spoke out of turn, Your Majesty," Ti-Ho said. "But I could not let that creature insult my people without response." Valera shook her head. "Do not apologize, I found it interesting." She looked at him carefully. "You have been hiding who you really are." It was not a question. Ti-Ho was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. "I was a soldier before I was a diplomat. I led troops in conflicts that my government does not like to discuss. I have done things that I am not proud of. When the council chose me for this alliance, they chose me because I know how to be quiet and polite. But they also chose me because when things become dangerous, I know how to be something else." "What something else?" He turned to look at her. In the dim light of the stars, his face looked older than his years. "Effective," he said simply. They stood together in silence for a long time. Something had changed between them, though neither of them said it out loud. The distance that had existed since their first meeting was becoming smaller. The wall between them was developing cracks. "Why did you agree to this marriage?" Valera asked finally. "You could have refused. You could have stayed on Earth with your own people." Ti-Ho thought about the question. "My planet needed this alliance. The Dralith are a threat to everyone, not just the Keth. If my marriage to you helps protect my people, then it is worth any personal cost." He paused. "But there is another reason." "What reason?" He looked at her with those calm, dark eyes. "I read about you before I came, your history, your battles, your rule. You have spent 1,000 years protecting your people and building your empire. You are strong and wise and dedicated, I thought. Perhaps there were worse fates than being married to such a person. Valera felt something shift inside her chest. It was a feeling she had not experienced in a very long time. You are strange human, she said softly. I have been told that before, Tiho replied. For the first time, they smiled at each other. Not the polite smiles of diplomats, but the real smiles of two people who were beginning to understand each other. Outside the window, the stars burned cold and distant. War was coming. The Dralith would not accept Tiho's warning. Blood would be spilled soon. But for this one moment, standing together in the darkness, Valera and Tiho felt something that neither of them expected to feel. They felt hope. The Dralith did not wait 3 cycles. They attacked in 2. Nova Prime was a small colony world near the edge of Keth space. 60,000 Keth civilians lived there, building lives in the shadow of purple mountains and silver forests. It was not a military target. It had no strategic value. The Dralith attacked it for one reason only, to send a message. Queen Valera received the distress call on her flagship. The holographic display showed a planet under siege. Dralith warships filled the sky above Nova Prime. Troops were landing by the thousands. The colony's small defense force was already falling back. How long until our fleet can reach them? Valera demanded. General Bora's face was grim. 2 days, my queen, at maximum speed. 2 days, Valera stared at the display. In 2 days, everyone on that planet would be dead. I will go. Valera turned to find Tiho standing behind her. He wore combat armor, now human design but modified for space travel. A weapon hung at his side. Impossible, Bora said immediately. One human cannot hold a planet against the Dralith horde. Not one human, said another voice. A young woman stepped onto the bridge. She looked similar to Tiho, with the same dark hair and determined eyes. Behind her marched 200 human soldiers in full battle gear. This is my sister, Park Yuna, Tiho said. She is an engineer on the human starship Lightning. She brought reinforcements. Valera looked at the small group of humans, 200 soldiers, against 10,000 Dralith warriors. This is suicide, she said. You cannot win with these numbers. We do not need to win, Tiho replied. We only need to hold them for 2 days until your fleet arrives. That is all. Yunnan nodded. I have studied the colony's layout. There are defensive positions we can use, choke points where their numbers will not matter as much. If we are smart and we are stubborn, we can make this work. Valera wanted to argue. She wanted to tell them that they were throwing their lives away for nothing. But she saw the look in their eyes, and she knew that nothing she said would change their minds. Very well, she said finally. Go, hold the line. We will be there as soon as we can. Tiho bowed his head slightly. Then he turned and led his soldiers toward the transport ships. At the last moment, Valera called out to him. Tiho. He stopped and looked back at her. Come back alive, she said. That is an order. He smiled slightly. As you command, Your Majesty. Then he was gone. The battle for Nova Prime began 3 hours later. Valera watched through holographic displays as the small human force landed near the main settlement. They immediately began building defenses, setting traps, and organizing the remaining Keth soldiers into defensive lines. The Dralith attacked within the hour. Wave after wave of insect warriors crashed against the human positions. The sounds of gunfire and explosions filled the communication channels. The visual feeds showed chaos and violence on a scale that made even hardened Keth generals look away. But the humans did not break. Valera watched Tiho lead a charge into a Dralith formation that had broken through the eastern wall. He moved through the enemy like water, his weapon firing continuously, his body twisting and dodging attacks that should have killed him. When a Dralith blade cut his shoulder, He did not even slow down. He simply kept fighting. Yuna was everywhere at once, directing troops, triggering traps that collapsed entire enemy units, using her engineering knowledge to turn the colony's infrastructure into a weapon. She fought with cold efficiency, every action calculated for maximum effect. Hours passed. The humans took casualties. Soldiers fell and did not get up again, but those who remained kept fighting. They rotated positions, covered each other, carried their wounded while still firing at the enemy. The Dralith commanders grew frustrated. They had expected an easy victory. Instead, they were losing hundreds of warriors for every meter of ground they gained. "Why will they not die?" One Dralith commander screamed over an intercepted transmission. "We have killed them a dozen times and they keep coming back." 12 hours into the battle, Valera stopped counting the enemy dead. The ground around the human positions was covered with Dralith corpses. The purple soil had turned dark with alien blood. But the humans were suffering too. Their numbers were dropping, half of them were wounded, many could barely stand, but they kept fighting. Night fell on Nova Prime. The Dralith pulled back to regroup. The humans used the brief rest to reinforce their positions and treat their wounded. Valera managed to establish a communication link with Tiho. His face appeared on her screen. He looked terrible. Blood covered half his face from a head wound. His armor was dented and torn, but his eyes were still calm. "Status report," Valera said, trying to keep her voice steady. "We are holding, Your Majesty," Tiho replied. "Casualties are high, but we have inflicted far greater losses on the enemy. They are confused. They do not understand why we will not give up. You need to retreat, find a more defensible position." Tiho shook his head. "If we retreat, we lose the settlement. The civilians are still evacuating through the underground tunnels. We need to give them more time." "You are dying for people who are not even your own species." "They are people," Tiho said simply. "That is enough." The communication cut out as another Dralith attack began. The second day was worse. The Dralith had learned from their mistakes. They attacked from multiple directions at once, trying to overwhelm the exhausted human defenders. The fighting became close and brutal. Valera watched Yuna pull a wounded soldier to safety while firing her weapon with one hand. She watched a human medic treating injuries in the middle of a firefight, ignoring the explosions around him. She watched soldiers share their last ammunition with each other, knowing they might not survive the next hour. Something broke inside her then. These creatures, these small, fragile humans, were dying for her people. They did not have to. They could have stayed safe on their ship, but they chose to fight. She ordered her fleet to push harder, to squeeze every drop of speed from their engines. They were still 6 hours away when the final Dralith assault began. The enemy threw everything they had at the human positions. Thousands of warriors swarmed forward. The human lines began to collapse. Soldiers fell faster than they could be replaced. Tiho rallied the survivors for a final stand. There were only 83 humans left standing. Many of them were wounded so badly they could barely hold their weapons. But they formed a line, and they held it. When the Keth fleet finally arrived, they found something impossible. 83 humans standing among thousands of Dralith corpses. The enemy was retreating in chaos, their commanders dead, their morale shattered. Valera personally led the landing party that reached the settlement. She found Tiho on his knees in the middle of the battlefield. He was covered in blood, most of it not his own. His weapon was empty. His armor was falling apart. But when he saw her approaching, he tried to stand. His legs gave out before he could fully rise. Valera caught him before he hit the ground. "Status report," he whispered with a weak smile. Valera held him in her arms, this small, broken human who had done the impossible. "You held the line," she said, her voice shook. "You actually held the line." "Told you," he mumbled, "humans are stubborn." Then he lost consciousness in her arms. General Bora landed nearby. He looked at the battlefield, at the human survivors who were still helping each other despite their wounds, at the mountain of enemy dead that surrounded them. Slowly, the old general walked to where the humans stood. Then he did something that no Keth had ever done before a human. He knelt. "I was wrong about your kind," he said. "I thought you were weak. I thought you were nothing. I was a fool. Please forgive me." The surviving humans looked at each other, exhausted and bloody. Then one of them, a young soldier with a bandaged face, stepped forward and offered the general his hand. "Get up," the soldier said. "We still have work to do." And together, Keth and Human began the long task of rebuilding. Kang Ti-ho drifted between consciousness and darkness for many days after the battle. His body was broken in ways that should have been permanent. The Keth doctors worked around the clock, using their most advanced healing technology to repair the damage. And once again, the human body surprised them. Ti-ho healed. Slowly, painfully, but he healed. Bones that were shattered knitted back together. Internal organs that had failed began working again. The doctors kept detailed records of every change, every impossible recovery. They filled entire databases with their findings. "His species should not be able to do this," the chief medical officer told Queen Velira. "Their bodies are soft, fragile by our standards, but their will to survive is something else entirely. It is as if their minds refuse to let their bodies give up." Velira nodded. She had stopped being surprised by humans. She visited Ti-ho every day during his recovery. She told herself it was her duty as his wife, as his queen, but she knew the truth. She wanted to see him. She needed to see him. The news of Nova Prime spread across the galaxy like fire. 200 humans had held against 10,000 Dralith warriors. 83 survivors had stood in a sea of enemy corpses when the battle ended. It was impossible. It was unthinkable. And it was true. The Dralith horde sent a message within a week. They were withdrawing from the border systems. They were suing for peace. Their commanders had studied the battle recordings, and what they saw had broken something inside them. "How do we fight creatures that do not know how to stop?" one captured Dralith officer said during questioning. "We killed them and they kept fighting. We broke them and they kept standing. They are not soldiers. They are something worse. They are a force of nature." The alliance between Earth and the Keth Empire transformed overnight. What had been a political arrangement became something real. Keth citizens watched the footage from Nova Prime and saw humans as heroes, not as weak aliens. Human traders were welcomed in Keth ports. Human soldiers trained alongside Keth warriors. Park Yuna was awarded the highest military honors the Keth could offer. She accepted them quietly and returned to her work as an engineer. When reporters asked her about the battle, she simply said that she did what needed to be done. General Bora became one of the strongest voices for human-Keth cooperation. He traveled to Earth and spent months learning about human culture and history. When he returned, he told anyone who would listen that the alliance was the best thing that had ever happened to the Empire. And Ti-ho slowly recovered. One evening, when he was finally strong enough to leave his medical bed, Velira took him to the observation deck. They stood together where they had stood many times before, looking out at the stars. "The Council is preparing a ceremony," Velira said. "They want to honor you officially. Your name will be recorded in Keth history as a hero of the Empire." Ti-ho shook his head. "I am not a hero, I just did what any human would do." "That is exactly what makes you terrifying," Velira said. She meant it as a compliment. They stood in silence for a while. Then Velira asked the question that had been burning in her mind since the battle. "What drives your people? What makes you capable of such impossible things?" Ti-ho thought about the question for a long time. He looked out at the endless darkness of space, at the distant stars that burned billions of kilometers away. "We are small," he said finally. Compared to the universe, compared to your species, we are tiny and brief. Our lives are sparks compared to yours. You can live for thousands of years. We are lucky if we reach 100. He turned to look at her. But that is why we burn so bright. We know we do not have forever. We know that every moment matters because we will not get another chance. So we fight for every single moment, every person we love, every world we call home. He took her hand. It was the first time he had touched her voluntarily. His hand was warm and rough with calluses from years of training and fighting. "I married you to save my people," he said. "That is the truth. I did my duty for Earth, but somewhere along the way something changed." "What changed?" "You became someone worth fighting for too." He looked into her eyes. "Not just as my queen, not just as my political partner, but as Valera, as the person who stayed by my side when I was recovering, as the person who watches the stars alone when she thinks no one is looking, as someone I want to protect not because I have to, but because I choose to." Valera felt her heart's beating faster. She had lived for over 1,000 years. She had ruled an empire, fought wars, watched civilizations rise and fall. She thought she had experienced every emotion that existed. She was wrong. "I am not easy to love," she said quietly. "I am old and set in my ways. I have made many enemies. I carry the weight of an empire on my shoulders." "I know," Tiho said. "I do not care." For the first time in centuries, Queen Valera of the Keth Empire did not know what to say. So instead of speaking, she did something else. She leaned down and pressed her forehead against his. It was a Keth gesture of deep affection, something she had not done with anyone since her youth. Tiho closed his eyes and accepted it. The ceremony took place a week later in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council. Representatives from dozens of species filled the chamber. Holographic screens broadcast the event to trillions of beings across known space. Queen Valera stood at the center of the stage, wearing her full royal armor. Tiho stood beside her, wearing a new uniform that combined human and Keth designs. "You have all heard the stories from Nova Prime," Valera said to the assembly. "You have seen the recordings. You know what happened there. But many of you still ask the same question. What do humans bring to this alliance? What value does such a young, brief species have to offer the older civilizations of the galaxy?" She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. "I asked the same question once. When this marriage was arranged, I saw it as a political necessity, nothing more. I looked at humans and saw fragile creatures who would break at the first sign of trouble." Her voice grew stronger. "I was a fool." The chamber grew very quiet. Humans are not strong in the ways we understand strength. They cannot live for thousands of years like the Keth. They cannot survive in the vacuum of space like the Vorn. They cannot regenerate from any wound like the Pale Ones. By our standards, they are weak. She turned to look at Tiho. "But they possess something that we immortals have forgotten. They possess the courage of those who know their time is precious. They fight not because they know they will survive, but because they know they might not. Every moment matters to them. Every life is valuable because they have so few years to spend." She faced the assembly again. At Nova Prime, 200 humans stood against 10,000 enemies. They did not run. They did not surrender. They fought for 48 hours without sleep, without rest, with wounds that would have killed any of us. 83 of them survived. 83 humans standing in a mountain of enemy dead. Her voice rang through the chamber. "Do not ever make the mistake of underestimating them. I did once. I will not again." She raised her arm and placed her hand on Tiho's shoulder. "This man is my husband, not because politics demanded it, not because treaties required it, but because he earned my respect, my trust, and my love through his actions. He is the best of his species, and his species is worthy of standing beside any civilization in this galaxy." She looked at Tiho. He gave her a small nod. The Keth Empire stands with Earth, Velira declared. Now and always, let any who threaten either of us understand what they face. The combined strength of ancient power and human determination, the wisdom of the old and the fire of the young. She smiled, and for the first time in centuries, it was a genuine smile of happiness. The galaxy has never seen an alliance like this, and it never will again. The chamber erupted in cheers. Representatives from dozens of species rose to their feet, acknowledging the power of what they had witnessed. But in the middle of all that noise, Velira and Tiho only looked at each other. Two beings from different worlds, different species, different lifespans, brought together by politics, united by something far stronger. Later that night, they stood once again on the observation deck. The stars burned bright outside the window. The future stretched before them, full of challenges and dangers and possibilities. "What happens now?" Tiho asked. Velira took his hand. "Now we face whatever comes together," she said, "as partners, as rulers, as husband and wife." She looked at him, this small human who had changed everything she thought she knew about the universe. "I never believed in love," she admitted. "I thought it was a weakness, something that clouded judgment and created vulnerabilities, but you taught me something different." "What did I teach you?" "That love is not weakness," she said. "It is strength. The strength to fight when there is no hope. The strength to stand when everything tells you to fall. The strength to burn bright even when you know your flame will not last forever." Tiho smiled. "That sounds like something a human would say." Velira laughed. It was a sound that surprised even her. "Perhaps," she said, "perhaps your species is rubbing off on me." They stood together as the stars burned cold and eternal around them. An ancient queen and a mortal man, two halves of something new. The galaxy had changed, and it would never be the same again.